Hello YouTube, Rubik's CubeX back today, and this is going to pretty much finish the Kisslicer series. I thought it was going to be longer. I'll probably do another video here or there just giving you a couple of tips and hints of how to get better at it. But today I'm going to show you real quickly how to make sure your print settings are accurate and what most of the little buttons do inside Kisslicer. And most of the time it is just trial and error, seeing what works better, what doesn't work, and over time you come up with a mental basically dictionary of what works, what doesn't work, how to make something really good quality. Now it is the software. It is very, very important. It's the software. Kisslicer is doing great, but it's also calibrating the machine. Make sure your machine Z-gap is definitely correct, and make sure your bed leveling is also leveled. This would also create a very, very fine print because it must stick to the print bed in order to have a very successful print. Now, if you do want something better to print on top of, instead of the stupid CubeX glue, because that's a super gooey, go to your local grocery store and buy Aquanet. It is a spray-on hairspray, and if you spray that on the bed and you wait about 5 minutes, put it back on, and it works phenomenally. And best of all, you don't have to wash it every single print. You can leave it on there and just keep printing until it doesn't stick, and you put another coat on. So let's get started for today. So if we click Kisslicer 64, just open up where you started. You'll get back to exactly where you left off. Now, before we get anywhere, you need to set your material. So you're going to go to this material tab, and what is your printer using? Depending on what you're using depends on what the settings are going to be. So I'm using PLA, and I like 1.2, and basically what you're going to do is you're going to tweak the settings. You're going to put, depending on your diameter, if you're using Hatchbox, it's probably 1.75. Use a dial caliber to make sure that's correct. Then this is where it comes in handy of just understanding stuff by yourself. And so first off, here is the temperature gauges. This you can change off and on depending on how you feel. Some people put it at 100, some people put it at 0. I like to stand at about 80 or so, and it does pretty good because it's the flow, how much solid extrusion is going to go. Now, these two numbers are very important. How hot do you like your material to be printed? I don't like mine to be super hot because then it slurs. I like to have it hot enough where it sticks on the bed for the first layer, but then cool enough on the rest where it gets a very, very clean print. So that's why for PLA I have it about these temperatures here. Now, depending on what brand you're using and what type of color or whatnot, depends on those settings on the temperature gauges. Next thing you got is these options down here. Now this here can be quite default. Default usually standard is fine. Sometimes, let me open up my Kisslicer. Sometimes I like to change it, and I go to these numbers here. And the reason I do that is due to the fact that I get a better quality print. And you learn this just by trial and error. And by trial and error, I mean you print with these settings, then you tweak it. You print again, you tweak it. And it's just again and again and again. It's no big deal. It just takes time. And if you're unsure what something does, just hover the little icon on it, and it'll tell you the value. Now, these three values here, these top ones here, determine the sucking power and how much it's going to extrude out, how much it's going to extrude back in. It's how it's going to be spit, pull, spit, pull. And depending on how you like stuff, you can change these numbers. And I found that my numbers on the left here work phenomenally. They're great, and I really, really do enjoy them. Now, these numbers here, just leave them at default. You want this at 100 because that's kind of the infill speed, and then this is definitely fine at that. You're going to want to keep your fan on all the time due to the fact that it allows a layer to be cooled. And if you want, you can change this number depending on how you like your prints. I like to have my objects kind of cooled sooner than later so that it sticks, but then it's still warm. So I changed the fan distance, means every 0.3 millimeters the jet rises or lowers, it's going to put the fan on. or lower, basically, instead of having the fan on at 0.5. This is just a small scale change, but it does do a lot. It does very well. Now if you go over here to the flow tweak, this is another one you can mess with yourself, and it's as is, it's fine as default, and I just changed it 400ths of whatever that is, and that's that's going to be the sucking power, how much it's sucking, how much it's not. If you hover over it, see if I can hover over it. Yeah, normal flow rate calculated. This is just the mathematical principle, how fast, how slow it's going to go. And that's about where you want it. It doesn't have to be there, but like I said, just tweak. Now these values over here, you definitely can change. This is definitely fine for if you want to leave it as is, and it's just trial and error. Change it where you feel like you could change it. I'm going to leave it for now, but these are the basic settings I kind of like to use, and it really depends on what printer you're using or what material you're using in order to get the settings just where you want them. Okay, now we're going to go over to printer. So this is the printer tab. We can see this is my G-code. This is my main. As you can see up here, this is this, and this is what you guys are using. Up here is printer name. That's what kind of filament you're using, and that's very important. And depending on what you're using, definitely changes the quality of a print. Most of the time, it changes how the print's made, and it's just ABS and PLA are very similar, but one's got a higher melting temperature. So you want to make sure the bed's at -35. That's just a go-to. Firmware, I'll walk you through this real quick. A bytes per bit printer format is actually the original file format for the printers from 3D Systems. It was actually made from bytes for bits before it was bought over by CubeX, and this is just the extension. If you see a bytes for bits E or F or X, that means it's going to be encrypted, and that's something that's very, very common with the standard software of CubeX. And if you have a BFB, then it leaves it unencrypted, allows us to tweak it. That's why we can bypass the chip reader. Now if you go to speed, sometimes you can change these settings, and however you like them. Like I said, it's all up to you. And once you learn how it prints, one print after another print, you get the feeling that once you get a really good print, you kind of just leave the settings, leave them alone, don't touch them. Unless you get an error or two, then you can tweak one or two things. But this is going to see this settings right here under printer and printer speed. This is going to be how fast is the head moving around, how fast is the X and Y axis is moving, is the bed going up super fast, is it going down super slow. This is all up to the user using it, and as default these settings are completely fine, but depending on how you like your prints, you can change all these numbers, and it's definitely just a trial and error motion. Now this is definitely fine as default. Now we go back to extruder map. Now make sure when you print you're going to click on the before we do that, we got to go to style. Style is how is it going to print each layer. Now if we want, let's say we want PLA 0.2. This is going to be a default settings we made, and every time we click on the drop down and click this is going to be automatically moved to it. Layer thickness, that's how thick each layer is going to be. Extrusion width, that's how thick it's going to extrude. Now skin thickness is important. That's after it prints every single layer. The last layer is going to be 1 millimeter thick. It means no raft, no supports, no nothing. It's just going to be full 1 millimeter. Instant surface, you don't need that. It's not really void, but you can mess with that later on. Loops, leave loops as default. Now what you do want to mess with, depending on your print, is it going to need to be strong? Is it something that a book's going to rest on? Is it going to be something that a brick's going to rest on? Depending on that, depends on the strength. And that's where you want to change the infill. Most of the time, most prints at 20%, unless it's something that doesn't need any internal, and you can go down to as little as 10. I recommend 10 and 10% as the lowest due to the fact it gives a small pattern on the inside. If you go any lower, it's going to mess up the print entirely, and you won't be able to really create a surface layer on top of that. So definitely 10 or higher. Now if the print needs to be strong, I recommend doing 50%, and on this version of Kisslicer, it's a different version. You can do a little bit differently, or if you click this button, you can set your percentage. So if you want 75%, oops, sorry. If you want 75%, then make 75%. And what that'll do is it changes the infill thickness. Means how thick is each layer on the inside going to be compared to the thickness on the outside. So if the object needs to be strong, add a 0.75 millimeters. So that's going to be super, super thick, which means it's possible you could come down about 16-20% and it'll be super strong internally. And you just have to mess with the settings, how you're going to want them, and it's completely fine. It's really up to what you're printing. Like I said, if it's going to be something that's going to need to be strength, you're going to want the infill up to about 50%, if not 33%. And if it needs to be strong, change this number in here. That's the infill stuff. Now, if you want to create your own settings, you're going to click Copy Settings, rename it what you're not, like Bob. And once you click Bob, so let's say I'm printing a huge object, something by 5 inches by 7 inches tall. By doing this, it's going to take forever. So let me give you an example. If I open up a file, and I'm going to go to something I just did, I think. One sec, let me save it. It's up here. File, export, CAD. I'm saving a file from something else real quick. Save. Okay. So if I click open here and navigate to an STL file, this is a big file here, and if I scale it, I haven't figured out scaling yet on Kisslicer. I'm getting there. Just I haven't got it perfect. Scaling is very, very difficult on here, so I use the standard software that comes with the box, but that's okay. So let's say we take this object, and if I click slice right now, it's going to tell me how long it's going to take to print this object. Now, if you think about it, think of reality. This is something that doesn't need a whole ton of graphics or anything sophisticated. It's just a square. Basically, it's a square. It's from a hard drive. I'm making a hard drive shell. And basically, it's a square being printed up. And it needs to be strong internally. So I'm going to knock down this 2.5 hours. I'm going to knock down the infill to 20% because it doesn't need to be super thick. It's already small enough. Then if I change the layer thickness to 0.5 and the extrusion width to 0.6 and keep this one at 0.5 as well because that's what it's going to do on the inside. And if I click slice, let it load a moment, theoretically it's going to speed up my time. And you might ask, why does it do that? Look, it cut off an hour and a half. Well, what's happening is I tweaked the settings to the point where I'm printing for the object. And I've tweaked the settings every single time you print an object. Every object's different. If it's a small object, you're going to want to change this setting to the 0.1 option, where it's 0.1 millimeters per layer. And by changing all of those settings depends on how fast the print's going to be, and depending on the size depends on how thick you want to print it. So most of the time, once I have everything else, the only numbers I tweak is this number here, that number there, and this letter. That's the only thing I change from print to print. Most of the time, if I want a different extruder, I'll go to extruder map, I'll click extruder 2. That'll go to my second extruder, and I print from there. Well, I hope you guys liked this video, and please comment below what you guys thought about it. If I'm going too fast, too slow, or if I'm just talking like a geek with no audience. But I'm having fun making these videos, and I hope you guys have fun watching them. So please comment below and let me know how I'm doing so I can make more. Enjoy.